We didn't have a lot of time to get through them. So she's going to start things off. She's got a lot of good information here for you. If you have questions as we go along, please do ask them. Chances are if you have a question, someone else has that same question. So just pipe in as you think of it. So take it away, Alicia.
All right. Yeah, we're going to talk about skeletons to just kind of give you some context as to what's going on, where we're at. I just want to say that this year, as some of you may know, is the 5th anniversary of the founding of the Design Hub. May 5th of 2016 is when the initial designers were called into a room and told they were part of a hub. And so we've come a long way since then. And I just kind of want to take you back to talk about what we were doing at that point and how that's changed. So let's go back in time with me, if you will, to every Sunday for months after the hub started. Any of those Sundays, pick a Sunday, and guess what I was doing. If you guessed talking to Kelly Bolden, you are correct. Every Sunday, I would do Kelly's opinion page, which was Wilmer's most difficult page, because as you know, Kelly's a stickler and wants to make sure it's perfect every time. So he would budget for it. I would do the page. Something would be too long, something would be too short. So I'd send him a PDF proof through PageTrack. He'd use the PageTrack editing tools to cross out sentences and add things and tell me all the changes he wanted to make. And then he'd send it back to me and I'd make the changes and then I'd send it back to him and we'd go back and forth. Again, literally, it would be hours of back and forth to make sure that we got his opinion page set up exactly the way that Kelly wanted it set up. And I will say that I did ask Kelly's permission to bring this up. And, you know, it was a lot. It was a lot of back and forth. And a lot of our pages at the beginning of the hub were like that. And I know that many of you were there and remember that. So if you can now come back here to the present day and let's go to this past Sunday. What do you think I was doing this past Sunday? If you guessed working on Wilmer's opinion page, you would be correct. My life doesn't change all that much in the past 5 years. As you can see, I took some footage of me working to share with you. So the big question here is, what was Kelly Bolden doing on Sunday? And the answer to that question is that I have absolutely no idea what Kelly Bolden was doing on Sunday, but lucky for him, it did not involve talking to me. Kelly and I did not have to talk once. He budgeted his opinion page. I did his opinion page. I had the page done in less than 15 minutes. I had no questions, and Kelly got to enjoy his Sunday instead of speaking to me. So what's the secret to Kelly Bolden's freedom, and how can you too talk less to me? It's skeletons. So the skeletons, they're magic, you guys. So what is a skeleton? We kind of tried to talk about this last time, but I think what I probably did was confuse more of you than help you understand things. So a skeleton is simply, it's just a framework for a page. And the main purpose of it is to streamline communication between editors and designers. There's no pun intended here when I say it's to make us so we're all on the same page. So we're clear on what we're all trying to accomplish, what we want, and we can get there together. So here's how it will work is once you sign up to do skeletons, then you will receive a skeleton book that we'll put together for you. And inside that book will be multiple options for different pages. So this is a couple of pages out of Wilmer's skeleton book. So when you're going to budget a page, you pick the skeleton for that page based on what page it is, how many stories you have on that page, and what ads look like for that page. So on this page, you can see these two skeletons on the right are the same version of an A1 for the West Central Tribune with 3 story starts. One of them has the banner ad that they sell on it, and one of them doesn't. So the skeletons all are named based on these pieces of things. So it'll be easy for you to flip through. You go to your A1, and then if you know you want 4 stories to start or 3 stories to start, so you go A1.3 is the 3 story starts, and then .1 would be the version of it that it is. So you'll have multiple options for an A1 with 3 story starts. So if you pick version 1, that's what you'll get, version 2, version 3. And then there's also a version 1.add, which is the one that has the ad on it, or a dot vertical, which is the one that has a vertical CP. To start with, when we start somebody on skeletons, we're not giving you a ton of options simply because we don't want to make it overwhelming and make the learning curve any harder than it has to be. We build the skeletons based on, we go back a few months of your A1s and build them based on your most commonly requested designs. And then as you request more, we'll add them to your books. So this is what one of the skeletons looks like and what the budget for that will look like. So this is the opinion page that I did on Sunday for Kelly. So he picked opinion 4. So you can see on the left here that opinion 4, this is the basic of what it's going to look like. And then on the left is all of the positions on the page as they're labeled here. So position 1, and then along with this, it has the headline for it. So it's a 30-point headline over 4 decks, and each deck can have 10 characters. So then you can write the headline exactly that fits in that space. And then it tells you how many words fit there. And when there's things like the standing head or column sigs, we make sure that we include that. This one, you can also see body copy without reader opinion submissions box. That's simply because, that's an optional thing on their opinion page, depending on whether or not they need that space for whatever editorial or column that they're running in that position. So if you look on the right here, you can see how Kelly formatted this budget. In this case, all of these things were linked and set properly. So he did not put the full budget lines, depending on what page it is. Obviously, if it's an A1, you're going to want the full budget line in terms of art and things like that. This being an opinion page, we know what those art things look like. So we just need to know which one goes in number 3, which one goes in number 5. So Kelly just put this together, and that was all the information I needed to put together the page exactly the way that he was envisioning it, the way he requested it. He had the word counts were all as I needed them, and the headline counts were all as I needed them. So that is how Kelly got his Sunday back and didn't have to speak to me. On the right here, I do want to draw attention to, on the bottom, you can see WCT head, States Rural Legislators Continue Minneapolis Hatred. That is because this story that he put in slot number 5, this Mike McFeely column, that's not a local story from Wilmer, obviously. So he was pulling that from the FNS Digest. And we do not want editors to take the time to make a whole new document for stories that you're pulling from FNS just to rewrite the headline. So what we do in that case is, as you can see here that Kelly did, is just write what the headline should be that fits your space on your budget. So the designer will just copy and paste it onto your page. So you get the headline you want without the work of, you don't have to create any extra files or anything like that. We don't want to make you go to all of that trouble. And that's the magic of skeletons. You just put that together, and then, like I said, you get exactly the page that you want. So a couple of things about skeletons that I want to go over just to clarify some things and to make sure that I'm really upfront with you about how all of these work. Skeletons are not templates. I'm not calling them skeletons just because there are better gifts of skeletons than there are of templates. It's because they're not designed to be a template. It's just a framework for the page. So as you can see, this is one that Kelly brought up when I was talking to him earlier this week about skeletons as a page that he really liked, an example of how the designer strayed from the skeleton to build something better for the readers. And Kelly talked about how much easier this page was because the 2 stories on the page that were not the CP were very easy to do, to get figured out. They were squared away much earlier in the day. And the sizes and everything were all set. So the designer had the time to focus on making that CP package shine and to get Wilmer what they wanted with that, because there wasn't the time of going back and forth about headlines and should this rail be 1 column or 2 columns and should the photo for the rail be on the front. Wilmer was able to say, this is what we want it to look like. And the designer said, okay, this is the size that I have and I'm going to work with it. And as you can see, that design varies from the skeleton. It's got an additional photo. The headline's a different number of decks and looks different. But it's just built around that framework. There is definitely a learning curve to skeletons. I'm not going to lie to you and say that I'm going to give you your skeleton book and you'll be using them the next day and they're going to be super easy and your time's going to be saved immediately. It's going to take a while to be familiar with the options that you have, be familiar with fitting the pieces in, budgeting them correctly, working on the headlines, these pieces of things. But I do want to say that, in preparation for this, I spoke with 4 newsrooms that have been using the Skeletons regularly now, and I spoke with people in all 4 of those newsrooms, and everyone told me that it was worth the learning curve, that they are helpful, that on the back end they're saving time, and that everybody said that, once they get used to it, it became easier and easier and easier and easier. And the headlines, again, I want to be honest, that's what people have reported to me is the most difficult part right now, is working on rewriting those headlines. And that's going to be a varying degree of difficulty depending on who you have working on these pages, just based on, people who have page design experience or maybe a little more used to thinking in character counts and coming up with those shorter words and stuff like that. Some people, it's going to take them a little bit longer to get used to that. But that's going to be the most difficult part, is just working on those headline characters. So Mark asked, how many A1 skeletons are there, for instance? It varies by paper. We are doing, for most papers, we're doing a 3-story start, a 4-story start, and a 5-story start. And we're having 3 to 4 options set up for those right off the bat. And then we add more as it's requested. So in talking to people and talking about what's been making things easier for them, and in brainstorming things that we can work on to help make these easier for all of you, because the goal of this is to make things easier across the board for everyone. It comes down a lot to really having the frontline help you, having your reporters work on this to bring them into how this works. Share your skeletons with your reporters. Make sure they know what they look like, what they're doing. If you're having somebody work on a story that you want to be your A1 CP, you can let them know the headline's going to end up being this big. We need the short header for the big letters, and tell them what you're looking for. Remind them of the importance of sticking, with their budgeted word counts, or updating you so that you're not using a skeleton expecting that you're going to have 700 words, and then all of a sudden you've got 1,400 words, and then it's a different story entirely. Talk to them about, as they are working on the story, writing headlines of varying lengths so that they can come up with those ideas for you. Even if by the time you get to editing, you don't like the headline ideas they came up with, they're still in the best position to have those headline ideas as they're writing the story. So it's going to make it easier for you if they've written you several options, and then you can just tweak them or reword them, or at least use them as a jumping off point. These are things that are going to make things a lot easier for you. As you're going through and you're kind of thinking through headline options, you can put multiple options in the notes for designers. If you've got one that is going to be 2 decks and you're not totally sure how it's going to break and how it's going to look like when it breaks, you can write multiple options. As you're editing a story, if you don't know where it's going to go, while you're reading it, if you want to write a shorter headline and a longer version, depending on, so that way once you decide where it's going to go, you've got options. All of these things are going to help you when you go to make your skeleton. It's going to make things easier. And we are working on something that we will be talking with reporters about later, that I can help your reporters with some of these things in terms of headlines and stuff. I can give them a little bit of training on best practices for that, and how to help this system and make your lives easier without it taking a large amount of time for them, because of course I know reporters are also under the same time constraints the rest of us are.
One quick note, of course we're talking a lot about writing SEO headlines for SEO. So this would just, I wouldn't lose sight of that. That's why there's a note here about, maybe writing more than one, because all of our platforms, use headlines differently. So, in the middle of this, we can't lose sight of course, all the other things that we're talking about in the digital side.
Yep, exactly. And that's where, that notes field can really come in handy. So the headline that you put up in your headline can be that longer one that's written for SEO for the web. But then at the same time that you're writing a story or editing that story, in the notes field, you can put a shorter version that's going to work for print while you're focused on that story, and think of it so that nobody has to come back in later down the line and go, okay, let me read this story now again and remember what it's about so that I can write, a print version. It's just about being more efficient and best use of time in doing that. But definitely, yes, not overlooking the importance of the digital piece and the digital headlines this week.
And Q actually has a separate field for a print headline if you wanted to put the primary option there.
Yep. Yeah. So definitely options there. And again, like I said, I am willing to work with, whoever wants to talk to me more about this on how we can work and make these easier, because again, the goal is to make things easier across the board. So that's ties into the benefits of the skeletons. The skeletons are designed, I want to be really clear about this. This is not, this is going to make IMOP's job easier and it'll make yours harder, and we don't care. It's not this is something that we've designed to make your job easier, and it's going to be harder on us. It's designed that once we've got them in use and we're used to them across the board, it is going to make things easier for all of us. On the design side, it's going to allow designers to work faster. It's going to eliminate the miscommunications and the needs for designers to go into Slack and ask questions. That's going to help us cut down on errors because there's going to be less rushing, and it's going to help us improve our quality. For example, that Wilmer cover that we looked at earlier, our designers right now are averaging about 2 pages an hour. So imagine the designer has half an hour for that page. It would not be uncommon in the way that we have to sometimes go back and forth in Slack and ask, this headline's too long. Would you like that trimmed? Do you want this photo on the front? For figuring out those pieces around the CP of, what's the skybox going to look like? All of that could take 20 minutes. So that designer has half an hour for that page, and they've now used 2/3 of that time on the outside pieces, and now they have 10 minutes left to work on that CP. When it's done with the skeleton, then all of those other pieces are set up exactly the way they need to be. So that's 20 minutes of time that the designer doesn't have to spend going back and forth, that you as the editor don't have to spend in Slack answering the designer's questions. All of those pieces then can take 5 minutes to do. I mean, it's very possible to do all of those outside pieces in 5 minutes. And now that designer has potentially 25 minutes that they can spend on working to make your CP pop and make it outstanding quality for your readers. So by 150% now, we've increased the amount of time that the designer can spend on giving you a quality page. On your end, like I said, it's going to cut down on these designer questions. The back and forth in Slack is going to be cut down. You're not going to have to be as available because a lot of the questions, I mean, if you look through all of our Slack rooms, as I do often, the questions that are going back and forth, a lot of them are things that are answered by skeletons. It's, this doesn't fit, this headline's too long. Is it okay if I trim this? There's not enough room on this page for all of these stories. Which one can I drop? I need a photo. All of those things, all of that back and forth can be totally eliminated, or almost totally eliminated. There's always going to be, a couple of things come up, but it's going to be largely eliminated by using the skeletons. Again, once you get used to them, and that's a big part of why it's going to be worth your time, because then you could have your evenings back, or you could focus on whatever else. It just allows that communication with the hub to be streamlined, because before the designer even gets to the page, you've efficiently communicated exactly what you're looking for and what your expectations are, and made sure that what you're giving us fits into that. It's also going to mean that you have fewer things to juggle when it comes to print production, because you're going to kind of front load the work that you're doing into the budget. So when you're building your budget, you're building your skeleton, that's going to be the main work of the print production. And then after that, the pages will kind of more take care of themselves. You'll still have to be available for some things, but the times for that are going to be more predictable. It's going to be, I know that I usually hear about 3:45 from the layout center about whether I have class overflow. So I know that I need to be paying attention at that time so that I can figure out what I want to do with the class overflow page. I know that when I link the last A1 story, it usually takes, X number of minutes before I see my proof. So I know that I just linked the last A1 story and I'll check back in half an hour. It's going to make those things more predictable, and it's going to make things a lot less hectic when it comes to the print production piece of things. Once these are functioning throughout the company and they're working the way that we need them to work, a big thing that we're going to be able to do is revisit the content deadlines that we have. I know a number of you are not super pleased with some of your content deadlines, especially in terms of that advanced content that has to be in 2 days early, how late we can have news content, how late some of your sports content can do, more of those things. Doing this to streamline the communication, make sure that, okay, here's the late news story, and we know exactly the space that it's going to go in, and we know that it's going to be written to fit those pieces. It's going to cut down on the wait time, the traffic jams, all of those other issues that are huge parts of the reason that we've had to set up the content deadlines the way that we have. So the future of Skeletons is you having more time to work on content. Just in general, getting your time back. So you can do whatever. Again, there's going to be a learning curve. It's going to take a while to get used to them. But once you do, it's really going to make the print or e-paper production part of your job easier. So that's going to give you time back where you can be focusing on your digital content. You can be focusing on editors and or editing these things with your team members, generating story ideas, working with your reporters, all of those things, whatever else you could be doing to better use that time.